Somerset levels in 878 AD were not land, but a shifting gray labyrinth of stagnant water and suffocating mist. Alfred moved through the mire, each step a calculated gamble against the black mud that clawed at his boots. The water rose to his shins, cold and thick with rot. He shifted his weight, but the ground gave way, pulling him knee-deep into the muck. He lunged forward, hands slamming into the wet reeds to steady himself, breath hitching in his chest. He stood, shivering as the damp air clung to his skin and pushed onward. Every movement felt like a battle against the earth itself. He reached the edge of a clearing where a longhouse sat hunched against the rising fog. The structure was barely visible, a low silhouette of timber and thatch. He reached the door, his hand trembling as he pushed against the heavy wood. Inside, the air was stagnant, smelling of cold ash and wet earth. He stepped over the threshold, closing the door against the relentless gray world outside. Here, in the dim, suffocating silence, the weight of a crumbling kingdom pressed down on him. He was alone, but the work of survival had only just begun. Alfred unrolled the map across the rough-hewn table. His fingers traced the borders of the hundreds, marking the lines where his influence still held. He pressed a seal into hot wax, securing the scroll with a firm, deliberate thumb. He stepped outside, handing the parchment to a scout who waited in the mist. The rider took the scroll, kicked his mount into a gallop, and vanished into the gray void. Then, the longhouse fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Alfred paced the length of the room, his boots striking the dirt floor with a rhythmic, impatient cadence. He checked the horizon through the narrow window, but the fog yielded nothing. Hours bled into days. He slept in short, jagged bursts, his hand never straying far from his side. Just as the tension threatened to snap his resolve, a new sound cut through the damp air. It started as a low vibration in the ground, then sharpened into the rhythmic, heavy thud of hundreds of boots. He stepped out. A line of men emerged from the mist. They were not soldiers, but farmers, their faces etched with exhaustion. They carried rusted spears and makeshift axes. They stopped before him, waiting. Alfred stood his ground, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The silence of the marsh was gone, replaced by the collective breath of an army rising from the mud. Alfred led the column up the muddy slope. At the crest, the ground leveled into a ridge. He stopped. Across the narrow gap, the Viking line appeared through the thinning mist. They locked their shields together, a wall of wood and iron. The Saxons halted, mirroring the formation. Thousands of eyes locked across the short distance. The wind died. The birds stopped their calls. For 5 heartbeats, the only sound was the heavy, ragged breathing of men preparing to die.
Forward! And
Then, a scream began. It started as a low growl from the Viking ranks, then erupted into a deafening roar. The Saxons answered with a primal shout. The 2 lines surged forward, boots churning the wet earth into a slick slurry. The distance vanished. The front ranks braced, shoulders slamming into the backs of the men ahead. Then, the collision. The sound was a dull, sickening thud.
Push!
The force of the
Push
impact
harder!
rippled through the
Hold
lines.
the line!
Then came the silence of the struggle. Iron striking mail like a blacksmith's hammer. Alfred watched from the rear, his eyes scanning the line for a tremor. He saw it. A Viking shield dipped, then buckled under the relentless pressure of a heavy spear thrust. The gap opened for a heartbeat.
By
Alfred
this
drew his
blade
sword,
we find
the metal
victory!
clearing the scabbard with a sharp
Charge!
hiss. He signaled the reserve. His warriors
Follow me,
surged
men!
forward. A wave of
We
motion
fight
that
for the
slammed
king!
into the stalled front. They pulled seekses from their belts, hacking at the exposed gaps in the lindenwood barrier. Wood splintered under the force of the blows. The Viking line snapped. A man stumbled backward, his shield falling into the mud. Another followed. The retreat turned into a frantic scramble down the muddy slope. Alfred pushed through the broken ranks, his blades swinging in a wide, rhythmic arc. The organized resistance was gone. He reached the lower ground, his breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps as the last of the defenders vanished. The pursuit slowed as the slope leveled out. Alfred took the final few steps to the summit, his boots heavy with the weight of the day. He stopped. Above, the thick gray clouds tore open, and a sliver of golden sun cut through the haze, illuminating the scarred earth. The screaming had died away. The field was silent, save for the ragged, heavy breathing of the victors standing in the mud. Alfred looked across the quiet ridge. He drove the tip of his sword into the ground, letting the hilt take his weight. He stood there, chest heaving, his face caked in a thick layer of grime and sweat. His hands trembled from the exertion, but he did not move. The rebellion was crushed. The silence held, absolute and final, as the light spread across the valley.